of course, our biochemistry is continuously on, but we do not leave that pure science subject as in kind of every moment kind of living of that particular topic subject. But when we talk about gender, we live gender every single moment of our life. For instance, the way we are sitting now, the way we might enact ourselves as a man or a woman, which is closely influenced and very, very closely influenced by various factors that determines whether or in a way or other factors influencing the way a particular individual enacts as a man or a woman. And that's what gender is, right? So the keywords are going to be understanding misogyny, but through the lens of gender, patriarchy, power relations, etc. The second half of that, so it's largely going to be the way we are socialized as gendered beings. The second part is going to deal with what kind of factors are influencing this construction of notions of ideas of manhood or womanhood. And thirdly, how does it impact in our day-to-day lives? How does it impact both men and women, both boys and girls? And lastly, let us think about, or let me share some of the examples where men and boys, men and girls, men and women and boys and girls are trying to break those stereotypes to make the world more safer, or equitable for everyone who are living on this planet. So that's how the outline of the session is going to be. We'll try to be informal in our conversation. The session is being live streamed, and thank you all of those who are attending on virtual platforms. Unfortunately, we won't be able to connect and have dialogue with you guys, but the students in front of me will be instrumental in that sense to raise queries or questions or doubts or share their feelings in this particular session. So thanks again for having me here, right? Have you heard about a term called gender? What it could be like? You might have to come louder, huh? Though your opinions, I'll try and repeat that for the people who are attending it live on other online platforms. What is gender to you? Heard of the term gender? Right? What is it like? Well, it's not an exam, right? One could just explain the term. Where did you hear this term? Well, okay. Let's approach this question this way. We play this game of word association, right? So the moment I say Pune, what are the keywords or what are those words that comes to your mind instantly when you think about Pune? Pune? Shaniwarwada, fine. Okay. Misal, okay. Nothing right or wrong, just go ahead. Sorry? Punyanagari, okay. Might have to be a bit louder, come louder. Puneri Patya, okay. Well, Pune, what comes to your mind? Well, if I say monsoon, what comes to your mind? Vada. Okay. Monsoons. Any words which are closely associated with monsoon that you carry in your head? Monsoon? Rains? आणि काय येतं? Monsoon? Okay. Okay, when we talk about India, what comes to your mind? You have to come louder because I can't hear you. You are wearing masks. India Gate. Okay. Taj Mahal. culture, diversity, diversities, traditions. Okay, so when I say, if I request you to participate by completing the sentence by filling a word, for example, a man is ... what it could be like. A man is, a man, sorry, walking. Okay, a man is ... Can't hear you, I'm so sorry. Masculine. Okay, a man is पुरुष. म्हटलं की पटकन काय डोक्यात येतं? Could use Hindi or Marathi terms if you are struggling with those specific terms. A man is tough. A man is strong. A man is... What are those most words those are associated in your mind? A man is... What attributes? Okay, a woman is strong, independent, powerful. Are these the perceptions of word associated in society? Because while saying powerful, you were like, in a way, by perceptions, okay? A woman is, how a woman would be perceived like? Supportive. A woman is what are the words that comes to your mind? A woman is, a girl is. Someone said talkative. Sorry? Multitasker. A woman is smart. Well, now look at the terms, right? We started with what we understand by the term gender, and we started pre-listing certain words that are associated with being a man or being a woman. And these are the words. Though we are not using any displays or listing down the words, broadly we get the kind of words that those have been collected in this conversation now. And we see that, none of the biological terms are being used to describe a man or a woman. Isn't it? So a man is a strong, tough, protector, breadwinner, head of the household. These are the terms associated. A woman would be strong, independent, supporting, multitasker, caregiver, a mother, a loving, caring, beauty. These are some of the terms which are associated with being a woman, isn't it? Some of the masculine characters and some of the feminine characters, as perceived by society, as you said. These are the perceptions of society, and that makes gender. So when we talk about gender, one need to really be able to very clearly understand the difference between biological sex and gender. What we are born with is our biological sex, right? What we are born with is our biological existence as a man or as a woman, and that is what is called as sex. So what is gender then? Many people use gender as synonym to the sex, which is not true, because when it comes to biology, we talk about sex, but when it comes to construction of perceptions linked with those biological beings is what is called as gender. For example, babies are born, if I ask a question, a doctor or a nurse comes out from a labor room and tells you that, it's a baby boy or it's a baby girl. How do they recognize it's a baby boy or baby girl? Do they see a six-pack guy or rather long-haired child born to say that it's a baby girl? Isn't it? Or does a man then is born with a long mustaches like Kolhapuris? Isn't it? So we are born with, none of you said XX and XY, simply, isn't it? So the lesson is that when we think about gender, we do not really, when we think about men and women, we do not really think about their biologies, but we think about the way they are perceived by societies. So gender is social construct of biological sex. It's not a definition, huh? Simply to explain. What is gender? Gender is social construct of biological sex. Now when we talk about gender, it has got two dimensions. You know, it can enter in the discussions around two dimensions. One as a social construct, and second could be the gender identities. Like we talk about transgenders and whatever third gender, etc. But third gender is a problematic term because the moment you start using the term third gender, the question is who is the first and who is second then? Isn't it? So that is why it is always recommended that let's use the term transgender. This class is not going to deal with the identities dimensions of gender at the moment. But mentioning that is something very important. When we talk about gender, it has got two dimensions. One is construction aspect of that, and one is identity aspect of that. Both the dimensions are constructed, right? But when we talk about construction, we talk about social construction of biological sexes. A baby boy is born, and the society expect that baby, that particular biological body to fit into a particular image, isn't it? And that is what is gendered expectation is. So if a baby boy is born, that biological body will be expected to carry in a particular way. The descriptions could be in a way bound by the construct of ideas of masculinity. And who does these constructions of ideas? Is it biology? Then what? Society, and that's why it is called social construct. So simply, one really need to understand that we are born with our biologies, but the way we are now, we are gendered biological beings. We are gendered biological beings, and everything that we carry or that we perform is influenced by these societal construction of ideas of manhood or womanhood. Example, one would ask boys or train boys to sit like, or rather provide a space to sit like, you know, using a lot of space like this. Whereas girls will be consciously taught to sit like, in a very disciplined way, their thighs are closed and, you know, isn't it? So the way, the gesture, the way you sit is also influenced by the societal expectations of how a boy should sit and how a girl should sit, isn't it? Or society would also expect you to be a particular, to wear a particular kind of costumes. Society would define the ideas of beauty, ideas of being strong, ideas of being real man, ideas of being real woman. So these are social construct of biological sexes, and that is what is called as gender. So sex is biology, gender is social construct. Am I able to communicate with you? Thank you. So let's do a quick kind of statement and your responses to that, right? I'm going to give you statements. You're going to tell me whether it is biology or gender, right? Human beings are born with eyes. Human beings are born with hair on the skull. A man should have a shorter hair, women should have a longer hair. Is a gendered expectation from that biology, isn't it? Whereas biology is this. Whoever grows longer, it grows longer. Whoever cuts it shorter, cuts it shorter. But society expects you to construct, to have a particular kind of hair. But that's gender identity. That's gender construct, isn't it? Women have womb, uterus in their bodies. It's biology, right? Every girl should be a mother. is a gendered expectation. Is a gendered expectation, right? It's not a biology. Boys and girls are born with eyes. अब मर्दों की आंखें हमेशा बड़ी बड़ी होनी चाहिए, औरत की कमल नहीं होनी चाहिए. Look at the kind of expectation. So we are not even leaving the biology, right? We are gendering the biology. We are gendering the biology. The way you stand, the way you sit, the way you talk, the way you perform, we constantly keep performing gender, both as men and women, based on these ideas of being masculine or being feminine, isn't it? That is what is called as gender. So when we talk about misogyny, one really need to understand that this misogyny, the ideas of misogyny, what is misogyny? I'm going to use this term in between because we are going to reach there. Misogyny? Well, gender discrimination. What else it could be? Misogyny. Must have heard the term, right? The idea is basically to get clarity on the terms so that we consciously and we use it with meaning in our thinking, in our writing, in our or other experience around us, right? Misogyny typically, yes, it is discrimination, but discrimination in its form of kind of attitudes and behaviors of hatred towards the women, or rather than there are other dimensions to that, right? Misogynist behavior would be considering other gender subordinate and hatred towards those subordinate. For that, and there are like discussions around whether women hatred would be considered only as misogyny or trans hatred. Transphobia also could be then considered as a misogyny, isn't it? But typically misogyny is what the male attitude, male chauvinist behavior, creating this enemy system in head out of this social and cultural construction of ideas of superiority, of male superiority, isn't it? And that is very much embedded in the social construct of ideas of manhood and womanhood, giving a significant or priority to a particular gender and subordination to a particular other genders, isn't it? So gender is social construct of biological sex. Is it clear? Great. Let me add another component to this description. Gender is social and cultural construct of biological sex. So what makes social and cultural different from each other? Any ideas? What is societal and what is cultural? We keep hearing this term, na, जैसे कप म्हणलं की बशी येते तसं ना social म्हणलं की cultural, political, economic, most of the time people use terms without meaning, right? It's part of the habit. Social, economic, cultural, analysis, isn't it? So it's good to get a meaning to that, right? Well, social, okay, what makes caste as a social group? Okay, so there are many castes. Isn't it a reality? Okay, because we Indians or South Asians are very trained into living in a kind of illusionary philosophies. If I ask you, do you follow caste? The very immediate answer would be no. Whereas everything will be back in caste. Your life will be in caste, your relatives will be in caste, the marriages will be in caste, deaths will be in caste, food culture will be in caste. But the illusion is that no, we don't. The moment you say you don't, it creates a barrier to actually deal with the problem. So we are happy living with these illusions. And likewise, I work with men and boys largely, in various parts of the country. So very rampant and commonly spread religion is, men are very equitable. They don't beat their wives. So you ask any man, do you beat your wife? Say, no, I don't beat my wife. Do you control women? No, it's very bad. We don't control. वो तो देवी होती है. Isn't it? So creating these illusions actually stops us to actually deal with the reality of discrimination, isn't it? So caste is a social unit. Why? Because there are various caste groups and they don't live in isolation, right? There is some kind of relation, some kind of interaction, transaction, relation between those groups, and that makes it as a social category. And that's how, because they don't live in isolation, right? So that makes a social category. So social with all different diverse groups and interactions and relationship with them. The relationship may be or may not be based on equitable principles, or may be based on power relations and discrimination, etc. But some other kind of interaction and relations between those different groups, right? That makes the unit as a social unit. Whereas culture would be described as the way of living in a particular group, isn't it? And which is always relational. So the way one lives, the way one, the kind of close traditions, you know, within a particular group makes the culture of that particular group, and it is always relational. For instance, if I go abroad, I become an Indian person. It's a relational, right? When I go to Delhi, I become a Maharashtrian. You know, that's a cultural identity. It's not a social identity, it's a cultural identity. When I'm in Pune, someone would say that it's a rural, he's coming from rural Maharashtra, not from Puneites. You know? And if I go to my native place, my village, they would call that he is an urban guy. You know, he carries the urban culture. So it's a relational thing, right? So like society has influences on deciding what is masculine and what is feminine, culture also has influence on deciding what is masculine and what is feminine. For example, describe a Punjabi man. Describe a Punjabi man, okay? A turban, beard, well built. क्या खाता होगा? Butter chicken, parathas. You know, these cultural identities construct the ideas of manhood for a Punjabi man. Those are the dominant ideas of construction of manhood in Punjab, which might not fit into the kind of description of a Maharashtrian man, isn't it? So like similarly with women, you know, so it is social and cultural construct of biological sex. That is the second dimension to the description. Gender is social and cultural idea. Thirdly, it is a time specific idea. Time specific idea. What it means, gender is social and cultural construct of biological sex at the given point of time. At the given point of time. Why I am saying that? Because say around 400 years back, a real man, or rather description of a real man in Maharashtra would be very different, right? What it could be? A horse rider, जो तलवारबाजी करता है, and in this part of Maharashtra it could be Shivaji Maharaj, or you know, the one soldier, you know, Maodas, yeah, isn't it? But if, imagine someone in Shivne start taking out sword and started riding a horse and coming to your school. You started laughing on that, right? So that doesn't really fit into the kind of idea, right? Which means the social and cultural ideas of manhood and womanhood can be changed over the period. By the period, isn't it? And that is why gender is social and cultural construct of biological sexes at the given point of time, and which is influenced by various other factors like market, history, mythology, media, commercials, cinema, literature, art, poetry, so many other factors influencing the ideas of manhood and womanhood. Now, having said that, so that is about the, you know, the complex reality of the way genders are constructed, and we all are socialized to meet those criterias of being a masculine or feminine, depending on the what kind of biological sex you are born with. I repeat, I'm saying that we are forced in a way to fit into these masculine images or feminine images, which creates pressures and compulsions to both masculine and feminine boxes. So if a biological boy, say 10-year-old, say 11, 12, start getting these ideas of becoming a real man, and that real man image is being constructed by society, culture, market, etc. Isn't it? And then six-pack becomes the hegemony. Now hegemony is the idea which is the most dominant and most visible form. Hegemony, have you heard the term hegemony? No? Hegemony, anything hegemonic is most visible and most dominant cultural idea. Okay? So, like for example, Punjabi man, your description was most hegemonic description, which means most visible and most dominant ideas of being a Punjabi man. Whereas there are so many other Punjabi men without turban. पगड़ी के बगैर कितने पंजाबी है, मूंछों के बगैर कितने महाराष्ट्रियन है. But the moment you talk about Maharashtrian man, if we think about dhoti, pheta and mustache, that's the dominant idea. If we think of, when we say real man and you think of Salman Khan and John Abraham, is the hegemonic idea of masculinity. Is the hegemonic idea of masculinity. Likewise, if we think about women or womanhood, if we think about this market created ideas of beauty by Miss India, Miss World, Miss Universe, that becomes the kind of dominant idea of being feminine. That's the hegemonic idea. So these hegemonies are created by society, cultures, histories, etc., etc. You know, that is what is called as hegemony. And we are constantly under pressure to reach to the standards of this hegemony. For example, you know, we do this exercise. I was doing this exercise in Bombay schools and also with Bombay urban slum communities. We have this life-size cutout of John Abraham, okay? So we would ask volunteers to come and stand with this life-size cutout of John Abraham. उनको मराठी में हिंदी में पूछते आप कैसे लग रहा है आपको? How do you feel now? And the boys would say that, you know, I'm feeling subordinate. I'm feeling powerless as compared to what image? I'm a lesser man than this man. You know? So it gives the feeling of subordination, creates feeling of being discriminated as against these hegemonic ideas of manhood and womanhood. Isn't it? If someone feels inferior to a particular kind of image which is created, is a problematic idea. So if Salman Khan and John Abraham want to be six-pack, I don't have any problem. Right? But I have a problem when they become definition to decide what kind of man I am. They should not be standardizing the definition of being a man, isn't it? Now, unfortunately, this gender system or this idea of masculinity and femininity mixed with these hegemonic notions of masculinity and femininity creates the idea of discrimination. So what is discrimination then? Because we started with gender discrimination, gender discriminatory attitude as a misogynist attitude, isn't it? So what is discrimination? Discrimination is assigning more value to a particular thing and taking away the value from something else. So if I'm wearing this particular jacket and he is wearing a blue one and I'm wearing a black one, right? That's a difference. That's not discrimination. There's a difference. I'm wearing black, he's wearing blue. But the moment I said black is more valuable than blue, और ये ज़्यादा महंगा है वो सस्ता है, the moment you assign value to particular thing, that could be the beginning of discrimination. So value addition to anything could be the beginning of discrimination. Isn't it? So add the value. So we say my caste is better than yours. My color is better than yours. My hairs are better than yours. My nation is better than yours. My army is better than yours. My language is better than yours. My pronunciations are better than yours. My Marathi is more pure than you. The moment you start getting into this additional of value to anything becomes the basis of discrimination. And what happens in gender power relations, a particular gender notions carries more value than the other one, which should not be the case actually. For instance, earning for the family and taking care of the family should be valued the same, similarly, right? But earning for the family, being a breadwinner, has more value in our society than taking care of the family. कोई कमा के लाएगा, कोई घर चलाएगा, we don't have any problem, right? लेकिन कमाने वाले को ज़्यादा मूल्य है, घर चलाने वाले को कोई मूल्य नहीं है. There is a problem. So assignment of differential value is a problem. Problem is not being different and diverse, isn't it? So someone said, when we talk about India, we spoke about this diversity, isn't it? You know, one of the myth, rampantly spread myth in our Indian communities are, अगर हम घोषणा देते ना, हम सब, क्या कहते हैं आप लोग? Are we really one? I cannot survive in Kerala for 15 days. I mean, I need chapati, bhakri, chutney, varan bhat back in Pune. Isn't it? Difficult to survive in Southeast Asia. कोई मसाला नहीं है खाने में. Isn't it? So, you know, even same is with northeastern parts. We are different, right? But we respect those diversity. But the whole idea of this hegemonic, now hegemony is the term, right? The hegemonic notion of Indian culture kills the subordinate ones. एक बार हम कह रहे हैं Indian culture. There is nothing called homogeneous, homolytic Indian culture, isn't it? Maharashtrian culture is so different. Even in Maharashtra, Pune is something different than Bombay, then Kolhapur, then Sangli, to Vidarbha, to, you know, you think about the geography. We cannot be one, we are diverse. But the hegemonic ideas brings, or rather, I would say, forces, you know, the marginalized, invisible cultures, invisible genders, you know, aside from the mainstream. Similarly, same thing happens with the kind of dominant ideas of caste, dominant ideas of religion, dominant ideas of numbers and gender. And that is why the problem of using term third gender is that, you know, the moment you say third, you are actually supporting the hegemonic idea of first gender, which is a man. You know, so see, gender socialization, that is how we are socialized. Because now I use the term gender socialization. If you are born with a female body, you will be socialized to become a particular kind of woman. So when we normalize it. For instance, if someone says that, oh, aise hi chalta hai, you know, she should be crying, she should be caring, she should be loving. She should always adjust with the kind of realities. That is what we are taught to be like through various systems, family, education, society, media, etc. And boys are constructed to become this macho, those who are using their power, entitled to public spaces, entitled to property, entitled to women and girls, entitled to their bodies. Are they entitled biologically? So where is this notion of entitlement coming from? The notion of entitlement to men and boys is coming from their socialization that creates power relation between the genders. Isn't it? That is what is called as gender socialization. So I stop here with the idea. What we dealt with is the, you know, I take a break here. The first part of that was, you know, understanding the concept of gender, biological sex, social cultural construct. 2, understanding the idea of discrimination by creating these hegemonic notions of manhood and womanhood. And those are not biological. 3rd, we have normalized it. We assume that men should be in a particular way and that's normal for them. Women should be in a particular way, behave in a particular way, that should be normal for them. And that is normal. That's how we have normalized inequalities. An addition of value could be the beginning of discrimination. You know, these are the key ideas that we dealt with, and we came to talk about gender socialization. We are going to screen a short cartoon strip, and title is Once Upon a Boy. Long back, a friend in Brazil developed this cartoon strip. Culturally, images are not matching with this subcontinent. For instance, women and men are not really dressed in a kind of South Asian ways. But the issues that the cartoon film is raising of gender socialization can be observed, or can be seen like happening in our day-to-day lives, right? Once Upon a Boy, we are using, and there is also a cartoon strip Once Upon a Girl, the way girls are socialized. Okay, we are using this edited version of Once Upon a Boy to see how boys are socialized to become those hegemonic men, to learn violence, to learn entitlements, right? And how they are constantly under pressure of performing manhood or become a kind of macho masculine man, right? So Once Upon a Boy, I guess 13 minutes or so, 13 or 13 and a half or something.
Dear students and parents and everybody else who's watching this session online, we understand that some of you have posted questions on the live chat session. We acknowledge your questions. We will collect all of your questions from your teachers. So please keep a track of your questions. We do not want to answer those during the session because these concepts are important. They're slightly new to all of you. They're slightly complex to understand. So just pay attention to Anand sir and try to understand as much as possible today during the session. Don't hold back on your questions. We will make sure every question gets answered via email, and your teachers will collect all the questions, all the answers, and share with all of you. So just keep your questions coming. Just know that they will not be answered during the session. Thank you.
Thank you for watching it. And maybe quick reflections if anybody want to talk about the cartoon strip. Any quick sharing or any thoughts? Well, in the interest of time, then we open it for questions and answer later. But what we have basically must have seen here is the socialization. The boy is socialized in a man, and the kind of various influences that he is collecting. From his family, from his batterer father, from on the streets, in a way, where he want to be like this well-built man, want to possess this kind of dog, or wherever he want to really speed his bike. So all that is social construction, isn't it? So we spoke about, we basically must have seen about that. It has impacted him in a way, because he tried to perform this masculine man on the say football ground, where he possibly was not willing to take a fight on, isn't it? But then he took, and the implications are like he got beaten up, right? What was the role of that pencil? That is something very important. What was the role of pencil and eraser, please? Yeah, to make things right, they are supposed to be like a particular way. So the role was basically drawing the so-called right way of being a man, and at the same time erasing what is not expected. So what all was erased? He tried to put on makeup, was erased. He tried to play with the doll, the eraser worked. The ball was homophobia is deep rooted, then the heteronormativity becomes the norm. Yeah, that's amazing observation. Yeah, so it started pretending that it's raining. So, the eraser comes and wipes out those tears, isn't it? So that's how we are socialized, and that's how boys are specially socialized. Okay? We do this film, we do documentary films, okay? And I was doing this film with various age groups, where the simple question was, do men fear of equality? हिंदी में क्या मर्दों को बराबरी से डर लगता है? मराठीमध्ये समानतेची पुरुषांना भीती वाटते का? And men would not really respond very clearly in the beginning. Of all the ages, of all the age groups, urban, rural backgrounds, across Maharashtra. But finally, they say that, yes, we do fear equality. And what are those anxieties and fears around equality? You would be surprised to know that the most frequently appeared response by the adult men in Maharashtra was, if equality prevails in our society, she will run away with other guy. Why would she do that, right? ती दुसऱ्या बरोबर पळून जाईल. असं कसं जाईल? It doesn't share any other work, I mean. But the anxiety that I have a control over this individual, and that control is that entitlement given by society, I might lose the control so that she might go away with another man, was a unnecessary anxiety, not real, because most of us as men and boys have not pondered into the words of equality. We haven't really experienced equality in true sense in our lives. So men do fear about equality because they get anxious of losing the power and control over other genders and their entitlements, and that leads to misogyny, expression of power over other genders. So what are those privileges and power that men enjoy? in this particular system, there is something called male privilege that we can experience. So to understand male privilege and male priority or male preference, one need not to really dig into the kind of theories and look into the books, okay? To think about equality, one should be able to observe inequalities in our day-to-day in real lives. You know, of course, caste, class, economic status, region where we live might bring variations in the expression of discrimination, experiences of discrimination. But that is rampant and cut across the caste, class, regions, religions, etc. Isn't it? For instance, observe the kind of food distribution within families. If a meat is cooked, if the chunk of food would possibly be, and hot meal will be served possibly to men, and which will be accepted as a normal thing. You know, ते तव्यावरून पोळी गरम गरम आणली म्हणजे प्रेम वाढतं वगैरे असल्याचे कल्पना असतात ना आपल्याकडे. Isn't it? You know, serving these hot rotis. So it's not just about sharing and caring about the person, but it creates that feeling of entitlement to a man. And there are cases where of domestic violence that comes to our organization for not serving hot meals becomes the reason for male wife battering, beating his wife. And there are domestic violence cases. And the reason men would give that she's not cooking well. She is not serving food on time. Is it a biological job? So one really need to understand that this discrimination and control, or this perception of entitlement over something, it's constructed socially, culturally, and by various other factors. Isn't it? For example, what are the privileges that men enjoy? As if those are their entitlements, please. Sorry? Okay, wage gaps. Just start looking into our day-to-day lives. Walking out at night. Choosing whatever career they want to. Respect in general, yeah? Choosing friends. Yeah, thank you. Choosing friends, yeah, you have choices. Yeah, it's because of the distance and he's wearing mask, so I couldn't hear. Sorry for that. Yes? Exemption from domestic work, domestic chores. You know, and all these are not biological tasks. So there used to be there was a eminent feminist in India. Her name was Kamala Basin. She was no more, and she used to say that women do not cook by their uterus. So cooking is not a biological task, isn't it? When anybody can learn it, but that escaping from that responsibility reaches men, or is perceived by men as an entitlement, that, you know, meals should be served to me. And by not, rather I would say by losing, because of the fear of losing those privileges, then exertion of power and control becomes the means to prove that you are the leader. You are the head of the household. Isn't it? So the system is called patriarchy. Male priority can be observed. Male privilege can be observed. For example, गर्मी के दिनों में ना एक सीलिंग फैन अगर है घर में, एसी नहीं है, तो just observe सीलिंग फैन के नीचे गद्दा किसका बिछता है. You know, like these very simple gestures within, or rather discrimination within family premise in our primate domains can help us understand the way discrimination operates in our day-to-day lives. So what men have privileges and control over women's work, like domestic work. So in patriarchy, there are Pitru Satta in Hindi, Pitru Satta in Marathi, patriarchy. Provides privileges and control to men or women's labor, work. What kind of work she should do, what kind of work she should not do. It provides control over women's resources, money, time, labor. That's a woman's resource, right? One of our friend says that, Alan Gregg, who says that, patriarchy is modernizing now. So nowadays, men are not snatching away the money from her purse, but they'll have control over her ATM card. Apparently, most of the men possibly might be knowing the PIN numbers of their wives' credit cards or ATM cards. The expression is changed. Experiences are changed. Control over resources, property, ornaments, gold, gifts received in a marriage are being considered as the entitlement of men. Patriarchy provides control over women's mobility, and controlling that mobility is perceived as the responsibility of the men. And they start feeling the entitlement of that. So you'll always find these male protectors behind these women in families. So there would be around 25-year-old married woman sent with a younger brother to her in-laws' home. Those in a very Maharashtrian, typical Maharashtrian families, आपल्याकडे त्या नवीन नवरीला सोडायला भाऊ जातो छोटा. Or rather, women's mobility is then linked with their sexual purity, and which is normalized in our lingo. For example, बहुत देर रात तक लड़की बाहर होती है. What would be the next thought? What is she doing? पता नहीं क्या करती है. Who should be with, So see, there are subtle ways of controlling mobility, and men do exercise these subtle ways to control mobility. I was doing this not with your age, but I was doing this with postgraduate students in one of the premier institutes in Pune, where most of the North Indian influential, affluent families were sending their kids there. And this girl from Delhi was telling me that, and she was telling about her boyfriend, saying that, he's very caring and loving, and she was using all those Sona words and saying that, he's very caring and loving, never leaves me alone. There's a problem here. Never leaves me alone. What does it mean? It means that, your space, your mobility is constantly being observed. There are number of cases of young men and women that comes to us in our training sessions, where they would say that, where a young woman would say that my boyfriend constantly keep peeping through my social media accounts, constantly keep asking me for the password of my Insta. You know what I mean? So this, in a way, stalking, becomes the way to control her spaces, and also to control, or rather keep peeping into the kind of her mobility, from which places she is going around, isn't it? And that is considered as that is perceived as an entitlement by many of the men, many of the young men, though not all. So mobility has been controlled. Reproduction is being controlled. How many babies to be born? Women are hardly asked about, childbirth. Forget about childbirth, even contraception. And that's why we say that even the governments are patriarchal. परिवार वाले कहते हैं बच्चे होने दो है ना, लड़का हुआ है तो उसको भाई होने दो, दो भाई हो तो राखी के लिए बहन होने दो. Government would say stop. Family would say go on. No one is asking her what to do with her uterus. That comes to them as an entitlement. Now, why I'm saying that? Because it is also perceived by the governing systems that reproduction is the entitlement of men. Few years back, Honorable Supreme High Court of Mumbai actually ruled saying that saying no to biological baby within a marriage should be considered as one of the grounds for divorce. As if she got married and one of the functions is giving birth to the children. Of course, it was not to stand in Supreme Court. It didn't stand. That kind of ruling didn't really stand in Supreme Court. But even judiciary will think in a very masculinist way. And that's how reproduction has been under control. And sexuality is under control of men. What kind of clothes she should be wearing, what kind of clothes she should not be wearing, with whom she should be friends with, is constantly under societal scrutiny, controlled. So patriarchy provides these privileges and control to men to control labor, work, resources, mobility, reproduction, and sexuality. If women and girls say no to any of these controls, what they get is violence in various forms. That might not be physical violence. That could be sexual violence, teasing. If suppose a girl says no to a guy, then what happens then? Generally what happens then? Feel rejected because the entitlement is rejected. She's done something wrong, or possibly might start a kind of campaign to defame her using social media platforms. Have you heard of these stories? Creating fake accounts, sharing her number in public spaces, teasing her, acid attacks. Have you heard about these news? Acid attacks because she said no. Isn't it? Because we have normalized male entitlements, and we have normalized by saying that ये तो ऐसे होगा, वो अगर ऐसे करेगी तो ऐसा ही करेगा. Isn't it? So this normalizing is a problem. There certainly is a problem. And that's why we said that when we talk about equality, we should be able to see where inequalities are and how they are subtly operating in our lives. Unless we start recognizing those, we won't be able to really deal with those inequalities, and women and girls will be at the receiving end of these misogynist behaviors, be it acid attack or be it online kind of defaming her, chedkhani. How does it impact men, boys themselves? It does impact boys themselves. They are cut from their emotions. Did you see that guy who tried to cry and he couldn't? Do you know that the number of men committing suicide is higher than any other genders in this country? But they do not go for seeking mental health services, counseling, support. They prefer to die, commit suicide, but never would come up and say that I need help. Because seeking help is not the male virtue as constructed in our society and culture, isn't it? Direction bhi nahi puchte. I was like trying to, I think the way it is normalized. No, हाँ मैं ढूंढ लूँगा. कहाँ से ढूंढ लोगे? बता दो, पूछो यार. No, मुझे पता है. So knowing all, that know all man is a lot of pressure on us as men. Because that is considered as one of the sign of a knowing man is a kind of a responsible man, isn't it? So you'll always find that men are constantly under pressure of performing their knowledge. Men are constantly under pressure of performing these masculine acts. Did you see that in the cartoon strip where he didn't want to really go and tease that girl? But his peer was like teasing him, right? The pencil was also poking him, right? Do it. That's the societal pressure. in possibly your age, your peer would really motivate you, saying that मैं हूँ ना, कर तू propose कर. People do that. Will do a lot of pressurize men to behave in a particular way. So it does impact men. What we do, what we call it as something called masculinity ticket, as a metaphor. Because it's a very typical age of this early and mid and late adolescence, where boys and girls both are constantly under pressure of performing their genders, in search of identities, and actually falling prey to those pressures also of created identities, constantly under pressure of performing their genders. They receive something called masculinity ticket, as we call it. It's a metaphor we use in our training with your age boys. So the person gets this masculinity ticket, okay? What the ticket is saying? Ticket is saying that go ahead, be a daring guy, never cry, gali bol do. If she says no, you have right to stop her on the street or defame her, abuse her. And they start using this ticket. And by using that ticket, they make connections with other guys. Because other guys then start saying that, oh wow, look at this man, such a daring guy. Usko jo chahiye hasil karke rehta hai. A man should be like this, because he start fitting into this masculine image and those boxes. And by doing that, a boy get the connection. Now what we as boys and men need to really learn to reject that masculinity ticket, saying that this masculinity ticket has got implications on me as a human being. As a human being, isn't it? Have you heard of Bushi Dam? Bushi Dam, a water reservoir in Lonavala. A huge water reservoir. So we were just going through these Lonavala police station, local police stations numbers about boys dead, these drowning deaths in Bushi Dam. For last decade, more than 30-35 young boys of your age drowned to death in Bushi Dam. Those were pure deaths of notion of masculinity. Fearless man. To perform that fearless man, they jumped in the water, drowned to the deaths. None of the women, young girls, drowned in the Bushi Dam. Isn't it? Road traffic accident is number one killer. Because boys do this all kind of stunts, isn't it? Boys need to understand the implications of that on their lives, on the others' lives also. Similarly, the misogynist behavior also isolate you from the kind of group society. It might give you a feeling of connection with a particular kind of group, like Hindustani Bhaus, but it is not going to take you through, right? Isn't it? It's not going to take you through. Because you might get connected with those kind of attracted, so-called very superficial and very arrogant and stupid ideas, but which is not going to take you through. Those kind of misogynist behavior might get you connected somewhere. It might disconnect you from many, many aspects of your personal lives. Your families, your good friends, your emotions. Isn't it? So it has got implications on both men and women. Both on girls and boys. And what kind of, we with adult men, we do this, something called Bapanchi Shala. You understand Marathi, many of us? Is a schooling men into being a father. I know, that campaign happened in Maharashtra, across Maharashtra, where we basically asked men what kind of man you want to be. When you enter home, do you want your partner and kids to welcome you, or do you want them to think that, oh my God, he's back? what kind of man we want to be. You know, so that family should welcome us, friends should welcome us. What kind of boys you want to be. Good human beings and good friends with all other genders. You know, start applying diversity scale to yourself. How diverse your friendship catalog is. And get to assess yourself. What kind of boys and what kind of men we are. Isn't it? And it is possible. You know, it is possible. Our antennas need to be constantly up. We have to say no to violence and abuse in our personal life, in our public spaces, in say public and private and public spheres of our lives, isn't it? Saying no means saying no is what the message that we need to learn at this age. When a girl says no, what does it mean? No, isn't it? What media tells us? Try harder. You know, media teaches us try harder. Not just media, also the way the ideas of manhood, na haar nahi manni hai, so try harder. Keep trying, try harder, compete. There is something wrong with others, that the whole feeling of normalizing entitlement. मैं गलत हो ही नहीं सकता हूँ. Nothing wrong that I am doing. You know, we need to save ourselves to become better human beings, right? I stop here and we open the forum for questions and answers. And what I realized is that many people also ask questions. I don't know how to deal with that. As you said, we possibly won't be able to deal them at the moment, but please, yeah. Questions or reflections or any thoughts, any sharing, of course without giving names. Reshma, would you like to take over? I mean the facilitating part of that? What's the time like? Wind time, right? Yeah, it's 12:30.
Don't feel shy, because we know that you're living through it, right? Every day. In school, at home, in your communities. Somewhere in the back? Anybody? I just would like to add one thing, that this is not something you learn or get over in one training session, right? This is something you live every day. So just talking about it with your teachers, continuing to talk about it with your teachers, with your parents, with your siblings if you feel comfortable, or whoever else you trust is important. Because every day in the newspaper, in the media, we are learning about different people who have been committing sexual harassment acts, rapes, misogynistic acts for decades. But young girls, young boys of your age did not feel comfortable speaking up at that time because they felt pressurized. Please, I would like you to pay attention, please. Students in the second row. Yes, I know it's been 1.5 hours. Just few more minutes. We'll be done here. Okay? So because of young girls and boys of your age did not feel comfortable speaking up, saying no, raising, when you were understanding it was bad behavior, whether it was a teacher, a parent, an uncle, a neighbor, an elder friend or elder sibling, it's important to speak up, ask for help, from anybody you trust. Doesn't have to be your parent. It can be a teacher. It can be an elder friend. It can be somebody else you know, a doctor. The importance of speaking up and asking for help is important because the action you take may help many more who will be coming behind you. Your younger siblings, it may help them, right? So as Anand sir said, as times change, even the behavioral patterns have changed. How somebody used to control or abuse other sex has changed. Understanding that, identifying that, and asking questions, saying no, and asking for help is important. Even if you take just that much from this training, that will help you in the long run. We all thank you for your attention. This is an important topic, difficult to understand, but at least you are making an attempt. And we thank you all. We thank the school administration, the school management, all of your teachers who are present here and also attending virtually. We thank all of you for giving us this opportunity for this training. We are available to answer any questions even going forward. We are in touch with your teachers, so if you have questions, do communicate those, and we will respond via email. We have brought 3 books with us that we will be handing to Modak Madam. And when she feels, when they get through these books and when they are ready to distribute, they will make copies and distribute to all of you. Do read those, do share with your other friends who may not be here, may not be in this school, your younger siblings, your older siblings. These books cover very important topics for kids of your ages. We thank you again and wish you all the best with your upcoming board exams.
Thank you, Ms. Sambare, and thank you, Mr. Pawar. I would call upon Reshma ma'am and Mr. Pawar, Ms. Sambare, and Prasad sir. Please join us on stage. Mr. Prasad, sorry, Mr. Pawar, sir. Thank you, sir. Our students have learned a lot from these pearls of wisdom. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Thank you.